Hello, class, and welcome to Developmental Psychology. My name is Dr. Neil Soggie, and I will be your instructor for this course. I'd like to start off with a little joke, shall we? So, in the latest Developmental Psychology conference, all the participants showed up with ladders. Why, you may ask? Because they heard that theories were reaching new heights. Okay, maybe not the best joke, but it does introduce us to today's lecture, where we will be exploring the overall history of developmental psychology, how it developed, and some of the main theories that we will be diving into throughout this course. So, as we begin, throughout all of human history, we have gone through assuming that everyone was like us. Whatever age we were at, we just assumed that's how people thought, that everyone thought like us. But over the past 150, 200 years, we began to realize that might not be the case. And so, developmental psychology has come about as a way of recognizing that there are intricate pathways of human life, from the earliest moments of infancy to the complexities of aging. Everybody grows and learns and adapts across various stages of life. And so it's important for us to consider the multifaceted aspects of this, from the biology to the environment to the culture, and of course our own personal experiences. And so developmental or lifespan development is like a grand adventure, really. It's filled with many twists and turns and challenges and triumphs. And so, as we go throughout this course, I hope that you gain some insights, not only deepening your understanding of human behavior and of theories, but of yourself as well, and of those around you. So, let's dive into lifespan development and discover some of the mysteries of us. So as we dive into lifespan development, particularly in this lecture, but this kind of represents and reflects the overall course, there are some central themes, some central theories that we'll be taking a look at. The first one is psychoanalytic perspective. And this theme focuses on the inner workings of the mind and how unconscious forces shape human behavior. And here we're drawing from the work of pioneers like Sigmund Freud and Erik Erikson. And so we'll examine how early childhood experiences and conflicts and unconscious desires influence personality development really across the lifespan. We'll also take a look at cognitive perspectives. And the whole cognitive theme really emphasizes the role of mental processes in shaping human development. So this is inspired by insights from people like Jean Piaget and other cognitive psychologists who explore how individuals perceive and think and solve problems at different stages of life. And this ideally will shed some light on the mechanisms underlying intellectual growth and cognitive development. We'll also look at social perspectives, because there's a central theme of social development that really kind of underlies human development, because it unfolds within the context of social relationships and cultural influences. So we'll build on theories of Albert Bandura and others. And in this, we'll investigate how social interactions and cultural norms and societal expectations shape identity and behavior and social development across the lifespan. And of course, we'll also explore a little bit of systems perspective. And the systems theme highlights the interconnectedness of individuals with their environment and the broader social systems in which they live. And so this is rooted in the ecological systems theory of Yuri Bronfenbrenner. And so we'll explore how multiple levels of influence, including family and community and culture, interact to shape human development over time. So, as we dive into this lecture, let's begin by defining lifespan development, because this really refers to the continuous process of growth and change and adaptation that occurs from conception through to old age. And it encompasses the physical, the cognitive, the emotional, and the social dimensions of human development, and really unfolds across the entire lifespan. And lifespan development recognizes that people progress through various stages, each characterized by unique challenges and milestones and opportunities for growth. And so understanding lifespan development is really crucial for several reasons. Firstly, it provides insight into the factors that influence human behavior, and that allows us to better comprehend both ourselves and others. And by understanding the developmental processes that shape individuals from infancy to old age, we can foster healthier relationships, support optimal development, and address challenges effectively. Furthermore, knowledge of lifespan development informs policies and practices in education and healthcare and social services. And it helps educators tailor instruction to meet really the diverse needs of learners at different developmental stages. It will also guide healthcare professionals in providing age-appropriate care, and it informs policymakers in creating programs that support individuals across the lifespan. So ultimately, lifespan development research is guided by various theoretical frameworks that seek to explain the patterns and processes and mechanisms that underlie human phenomena and human development. And in this, you can begin to discover that you are not the same as you were 10 years ago, and you won't be the same 10 years from now. And that's just recognizing that we all grow and change. Now, let's look a little bit at how the history of lifespan development and research has changed over time and how cultural expectations have changed over time. Now, we're going to focus primarily upon England here. Many different countries do dive into this, but we speak English, so that is one of the primary cultural influences upon us. So during the 16th through to the 18th centuries, perceptions of childhood underwent really a significant transformation. And this is marked by some societal shifts and cultural attitudes. So one of the first stages that we can kind of think about is the lack of labor standards for children in England. Now, in England during the 1500s and the 1600s, there were really minimal regulations concerning child labor. Children, especially from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, were often employed in very harsh working conditions in fields and mines and factories, and they were really, society expected them to contribute to the family's income from a very early age. And their rights and their welfare were very much neglected. And this eventually led to what we call the rise of the growing concern phase. Because as societal awareness of child welfare grew, there emerged a phase that we call the growing concern, which means growing concern for the well-being of children. And so advocates began to voice concerns about the exploitation and mistreatment of children, leading to early discussions about child rights and protections. And you may have heard about Sunday school. Well, where did Sunday school come from? Sunday school was actually a movement in the late 18th century. And here, the Sunday school movement emerged as a response to the lack of educational opportunities for children, especially those from impoverished backgrounds. And so Sunday schools provided basic literacy and religious education, aiming to uplift children to provide them with some moral guidance. And this concern for kind of a moralism, and just to kind of show the harshness that still kind of went on, there was a practice in the Pilgrim colonies in America called child swapping. And in the early American colonies, particularly among the Pilgrims, this practice of child swapping emerged. And it was basically families believed that they would love their own children too much to be a harsh disciplinarian on them. And they believed that harsh discipline was important to kind of save their soul. So families would temporarily exchange children to help with domestic chores and farm work, and to basically not spare the rod so as not to spoil the child. They believed that this would provide children with the kind of moral background that they would need in order to live life. And then there came also something of great concern was the high child mortality rates, particularly in places like Ireland. In Ireland, particularly during the 17th and 18th centuries, high child mortality rates were prevalent due to factors such as poverty and disease and inadequate health care. And children faced really significant risks to their health and survival. And so this, too, contributed to concerns about child welfare and well-being. And indeed, even into the early 20th century in many places, depending upon the development of the community, child mortality rates were extremely high. For example, in the early 1900s, my own family, when they moved to North America, half of the children died within the first year. And that just kind of goes to show that these kinds of things can be very impactful upon people's perceptions of children. People didn't want to become engaged with children as far as, wanting to love them too much. Because first off, there's the expectation that they might die. So you don't want to be kind of putting yourself through all of that emotional pain. But also the expectation that they were really just little adults. So they were expected to work and be productive like adults were. And they're not. And people didn't realize that and understand that, though. There were, though, some early contributors that really started to change this way of thinking a little bit. And I want to dive in and talk about some of those early contributors. Three main ones that I want to talk about are Dietrich Tiedemann, Charles Darwin, and G. Stanley Hall. Now, Dietrich Tiedemann was a German researcher who conducted pioneering research on child development in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. And he was best known for his work called The Observations on the Development of the Mental Faculties of Children, which was published in 1787, which focused on the sensory and cognitive development of infants. And Tiedemann's observations, basically they were baby diaries, laid the groundwork for the scientific study of child development, emphasizing the importance of some systematic observations and documentation in understanding the early stages of human cognition. Then we come to Charles Darwin. And Darwin, although he's renowned for his theory of evolution, also made significant contributions in the field of developmental psychology. In his book, The Expression of Emotions in Man and Animals, in 1872, Darwin explored the evolutionary origins of emotions and their expression across different species, including humans. And Darwin's insights into adaptive significance of emotions provided a framework for understanding the role of emotions in human development and social behavior. And like Tiedemann, Charles Darwin also kept diaries of children and of his own children. And so these two baby diary researchers gave some insight into how people would change from one age to the next. And then we get finally into some real formal psychology with G. Stanley Hall. G. Stanley Hall was one of the original psychologists in America who had studied in Germany at one of the first psychological laboratories and then kind of helped to establish the American Psychological Association in America. And he was a key figure in psychology, and perhaps he's best known for his concept, and this is a mouthful, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. I'm going to say that again. Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, which basically means this, that the stages of individual development mirror the evolutionary history of the species. So we go through the tadpole stage, and we go through the reptile stage, and we go through the monkey ape stage, and then we finally become the full humans. Now, this idea is kind of fallen out of favor, but it was very popular for a great deal of time. And indeed, people will still sometimes talk about the reptilian brain, which refers to the most primitive part of the human brain. And it kind of harkens back to this idea of G. Stanley Hall and ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. And just a little bit of kind of fun humor. Simpsons have even tied into this. One time, Homer became extremely smart, and the first things that came out of his mouth was ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. And when I saw that, I just burst out laughing because it was a real genius kind of moment from modern pop culture. Now, Hall's influential work, though, when we talk about kind of the lifespan, is his book on adolescence in 1904. And in this book, he highlighted the importance of adolescence really as a distinct period of development and explored the psychological and social challenges that faced young people during this stage. And this was a bit of a surprise to many people, because for many people, adolescence was, you were... there was some concern, hundreds of years before for children, and that had grown, but adolescence was still not really kind of recognized as its own distinct phase. And G. Stanley Hall was part of that. So all of the baby diaries of Dietrich Tiedemann and Charles Darwin and the kind of more formal work of G. Stanley Hall really kind of laid some of the foundations for our lifespan development. And then we can get into more giants in the field, people like Sigmund Freud. Now, Sigmund Freud, a little bit about him. He was born in 1856 in Freiburg, Moravia, in what we now call the Czech Republic, or Czechia. And he trained in Vienna and spent most of his life in Vienna, except for the last few years of his life. And he pioneered and founded psychoanalysis, and this groundbreaking theory for understanding human behavior really kind of left an indelible mark on psychology and culture. And in 1899, Freud published his seminal work, The Interpretation of Dreams, in which he introduced many of the fundamental concepts of psychoanalysis, including things like the unconscious mind and what we call repression, where we kind of hide the unconscious conflicts that we are dealing with and don't make them ourselves consciously aware of them, and the interpretation of dreams and how that manifests itself in unconscious desires and conflicts. And Freud's theory of psychosexual development, outlined in his works such as 3 Essays on the Theory of Sexuality, which he published in 1905, and Beyond the Pleasure Principle, which he published in 1920, really proposed that this early childhood experiences and the unconscious conflicts that happen really shape personality development. And according to Freud, individuals progress through stages such as the oral stage and the anal stage and the phallic stage and the latency stage and the genital stage, each characterized by specific psychosexual conflicts and resolutions. And all of these ideas of Freud undoubtedly sparked controversy and debate and challenged really the prevailing notion of human nature. And what Freud did, though, was bring to the fore the role of sexuality in our mental life. And despite facing criticism and skepticism, Freud's influence continued to grow, and his concepts permeated various fields, including literature, and art, and popular culture. And throughout his life, Freud maintained a prolific writing and lecturing schedule, and he expanded and refined his theories in response to his clinical observations. And so he contributed to our basic understanding of psychology and the whole concept of what we call the ego and the id and the superego. So that's just a little bit about Freud. Unfortunately, he also lived in the time of the rise of Nazism, and when the Nazis took over Austria, he was forced to flee into London, where he died in 1939. So I want to kind of just take a little bit of time now and explore a little bit of Sigmund Freud's psychosexual development theory that was posited by how early childhood experiences play such a critical role in shaping an individual's personality and behavior. The basic idea to understand here is the idea of eros, what we translate as sex or love. And that is the pleasure that we get from doing something. And the pleasure that we get from doing something changes over time. And the places that that pleasure is focused changes over time. The key is, can we use that pleasure in an appropriate way? And according to Freud, children progress through a series of psychosexual stages, each characterized by specific erogenous zones and developmental tasks. And so failure to navigate these stages successfully can lead to what he called fixation, where there's some unresolved conflicts that occur at the unconscious level, and those conflicts are kind of like nuts that disrupt smooth functioning in the personality and will persist into adulthood. And so it's important for a child to avoid having these kind of Nazis fixations at different stages, because then our personality can run more smoothly. But the reality is we all have these little quirks within us that stem from our early childhood. And so here's just a simplified version of Sigmund Freud's psychosexual development. We start off with, that first 18 months of life, what Freud would call the oral stage. Now, during the oral stage, the primary source of pleasure and gratification is the mouth. For example, an infant derives pleasure from sucking, whether on a bottle or a thumb or a breast or a pacifier. And so oral fixation in adulthood might manifest as overeating or smoking or a preoccupation with oral activities. Then we have the anal stage, which would be, approximately 18 months to 3 years. And here, in the anal stage, on the child's experience, with bowel movements and toilet training. And so the example here would be successful toilet training leads to a sense of mastery and autonomy, while unresolved conflicts may result in anal retentive, that is, being excessively neat and orderly, or, on the contrast, anal expulsive, where you're messy and completely disorganized, personality traits. So we would argue that it's important to work through these stages, but then make a successful transition to the next stage in this process. Then we have the phallic stage, and the phallic stage is around ages 3 to 6, and the phallic stage is characterized by the focus on the genital region and the Oedipus or Electra complex. So here we can kind of think in terms of, during this stage, boys experience the Oedipus complex, where they develop unconscious desires for their mothers and experience rivalry with their fathers. And girls may experience the Electra complex, feeling feelings for their fathers and jealousy towards their mothers. Something that's very common in the phallic stage is for children to just kind of walk around with their hands down their pants, and that's normal. It can be disturbing for some parents, but that is part of that stage. But then, around the age of 6, children transition to what we call the latency stage. And the latency stage is the stage where there's a period of relative calm, where sexual urges are suppressed and children focus on developing their social skills and their cognitive skills. Now, for example, children may immerse themselves in school activities or hobbies or friendships. And so they redirect their energy away from their sexual impulses to other things. So it's kind of that non-sexual, and that's why it's called the latency stage. And here, normally, you would have, boys playing with boys, girls playing with girls, that sort of thing. And there isn't this kind of interaction between the two. But then we get the genital stage. And here Freud would say this is the last stage of psychosocial development, where the genital stage marks the onset of mature sexual interest in relationships, with a focus here, he would argue, on the heterosexual pleasure. And so, for example, individuals seek intimate relationships and strive for sexual fulfillment within the context of mutually satisfying partnerships. So here, Freud's psychosexual development theory has sparked some interest as well as a lot of criticism, but the one thing that it did was help people to recognize a couple of things. First off, it pushed sexuality right back to birth, and it also helped people to understand how sexuality is such a powerful force within people. And the other thing that it did is highlight the importance of childhood and childhood experiences in the mental life of an individual. It's profoundly important, and Freud is the one that brought that to the fore. Now, Another person that I want to really highlight here is Erik Erikson. Erik Erikson was born in 1902 in Frankfurt, Germany. He was a pioneering psychologist in his own right, but he focused on psychosocial development. And Erikson's groundbreaking work really reshaped our understanding of human development and emphasized the importance of social and cultural factors. Now, some things to kind of be mindful of here. In Erikson's personal life, he was raised by a single mother and struggled with his own identity, issues of belonging. And so he did travel widely in his early adulthood and got to see different cultures and how different cultures viewed lifespan development. And Erikson really kind of honed in on psychology during some time when he worked with Sigmund Freud's daughter, Anna Freud, in Vienna. And Anna Freud is a powerful figure in her own right. If she was the child of any other person, she would be a dominant figure, but because her father was Sigmund Freud himself, she gets to kind of lost in the shadows sometimes. But she was a powerful figure in understanding developmental psychology from a psychoanalytic perspective, and that's kind of where Erik Erikson came from. Now, in the 1950s, Erikson published his seminal work, Childhood and Society. And in this, he introduced his theory of psychosocial development. Now, unlike Freud's emphasis on psychosexual stages, Erikson proposed 8 stages of development, each characterized by unique psychosocial crises or challenges. And these stages span from infancy through to old age, and they really encompass key milestones and transitions in an individual's life. And Erikson's theory really emphasizes the interaction between personal development and societal expectations and highlights the role of social relationships and cultural norms and historical context in shaping a person's identity. Now, just to kind of round out his career, Erikson died in 1994 after being a professor at some famous institutions like University of California, Berkeley, and Harvard. So he was a profoundly powerful figure, and in fact, probably one of the most important figures in this course. And this is why, because of his psychosocial development. And this will kind of be our template for this course. So if there is one schedule, one template for understanding lifespan development, this is it. Erikson's psychosocial development. It's 8 stages of human development, each characterized by these unique psychosocial crises or challenges. Now, unlike Freud's focus on psychosexual stages, Erikson's theory emphasizes crises and in development that need to be resolved through the social context. And so here is Erikson's psychosocial stages. The first stage from in early infancy, up to a year old or thereabouts. The important thing to learn there is trust versus mistrust. So in this first stage, it really centers on the infant's basic needs for trust and security. And so there needs to be successful resolution between the development of trust and confidence in caregivers, while failure may lead to feelings of mistrust and insecurity. Then there is the second stage, from about a year to 3 years, you have, and this would be early childhood, would be autonomy versus shame and doubt. So the second stage focuses on the child's growing independence and them being able to develop a sense of autonomy. So some people will call this the terrible twos, but the benefit here is that they're building autonomy. They're learning, they're exploring and trying to figure out how to function on their own. And so children begin to assert their independence and they begin to explore their environment. That can mean they're going to make a big mess, but it's about exploring and learning. And so this leads eventually, ideally, to a feeling of self-confidence and autonomy. And so it's very important for parents not to overreact during this stage, because excessive criticism or excessive control can result in feelings of shame and doubt for the child. And so some safe exploration and some safe messes are actually a good thing in this stage. Then we come to the preschool age, approximately 3 through to 6, or kind of those first years. And this we would call initiative versus guilt. And so during this stage, children take initiative in play and social interaction. They begin to engage with others. And so successful resolution here fosters a sense of purpose and initiative, while unresolved conflicts may lead to feelings of guilt and inadequacy. So it's about putting yourself out there and being successful so that you want to take initiative and engage in things. If you don't successfully work through this stage, then you will discover that you are being overwhelmed by feelings of inadequacy and guilt, and you don't want to engage, and that can cause problems in the long run. Then we have ages in the school years, primary school years, ages 6 through to 11 years old. We have industry versus inferiority. This kind of ties in with initiative versus guilt. And in this fourth stage, it really centers on the development of competence and mastery in academic or social activities. When you discover things that you're good at, whether it be a certain sport, whether that be academics, whether that be music, whether that be art, whatever it is, you discover that you're good at something. And so children strive to achieve success, and they strive to achieve recognition, and this develops a sense of competence. However, feelings of inferiority may arise if they perceive themselves as incompetent or unable to meet expectations. And so parents, again, need to be very careful here not to be overly harsh. You want to encourage a sense of competence, not incompetence, because that will lead to industry and the willingness to engage and grow in something. Then we have the big ones, the ones that you're probably dealing with right now. Identity versus role confusion in adolescence, so 12 through to 18, you could even argue up to 25. In this stage, adolescence is marked by a search for a coherent sense of self. Who am I? What is my identity? And so successful resolution here involves exploration of personal values and beliefs and aspirations, and this really leads to a strong sense of identity. Who am I? How do I fit into the world? However, adolescents may experience some role confusion or identity crisis if they struggle to define themselves, and that can lead to substance use, or that can lead to willingness to withdraw basically from society and not engage. And so that can be very difficult for many people. And so recognizing that one of the main tasks that a person has in their teen years is defining who they are is extremely important. And that's, for example, why gang society is so prevalent in adolescence, because that is a place that gives a ready identity and helps to waylay some of that emotional struggle that goes on. And so there's a purpose for it. Now, let's move on to, not to say that that purpose is a good thing. It's better to have an identity in something else, but just recognizing that that's there. Then we go on to young adulthood. So we can roughly say, 19 through to 40 or 25 through to 40, that kind of age, is intimacy versus isolation. And here is where young adults seek meaningful relationships and intimacy with others. And so here, successful resolution really kind of fosters the development of intimate relationships based on trust and commitment. However, individuals may experience isolation and loneliness if they are unable to form close connections. And so here again, it's important to get through this process with a sense of some strong, intimate connections where there's trust and where there's commitment. Those are some key tasks that need to happen psychologically in life. Without that, then you get caught in isolation rather than in intimacy. Then we come to middle adulthood. Here we can argue, 40 through to 65. And this is what we call generativity versus stagnation. And so middle adulthood is characterized by a focus upon career, on family, on contributing to society. It's the prime earning years. It's also the time where ideally you're generating things for the good of society, for the next generation, not just for yourself. And so successful resolution here really involves a sense of fulfillment and productivity, where an individual can contribute to the well-being of future generations. And so the contrast to that is stagnation. And stagnation can occur in a couple of ways. It can occur if individuals feel unproductive. It can also occur if they feel unfulfilled. And one of the ways that people are unfulfilled sometimes is when they're really selfish. And it's for gathering their own wealth alone. That too can be unfulfilling. It can be a sign, it's kind of a tricky way of, while you're generating a lot, you are still stagnating to some extent. And then finally, we have integrity versus despair. And that would be late adulthood, so beyond that 65 years of age. And this is really for Erik Erikson, the final stage. It centers on reflecting upon one's life and coming to terms with the person's own mortality. And it's in this successful resolution, it leads to a sense of wisdom and acceptance of life's challenges, while at the same time, the unresolved conflicts may result in feelings of despair or regret. And so the important thing here is to kind of work through all the different stages that have come before and to resolve those so that you have a sense of integrity, that your life was worth something, rather than despair where you look back and go, oh, what was the point of that? Because you are coming to that place of looking at your own mortality, ideally. Now, some people don't. Some people deny their own death, and that will inevitably lead to despair, one way or the other. So overall, the thing I want to kind of highlight here is that Erikson's psychosocial development theory is really kind of provides us with a holistic framework for understanding human growth and development across the lifespan. And for that reason, it's one of the most important theories within this course. Now, I want to kind of dive into Jean Piaget. And Piaget's model of cognitive development is one of the most influential theories in the field of developmental psychology, particularly in childhood developmental psychology. Piaget really proposed that children actively construct their understanding of the world through a series of stages, and each is characterized by distinct cognitive abilities and ways of thinking. In essence, children do not think like adults in any way, shape, or form, and we shouldn't pretend that they do. And oftentimes we've all been children, but we forget what the limits of each stage were once we moved on to the next stage. But Jean Piaget reminds us that there are real limits to each stage, and we need to understand how a child is limited in their cognitive processing and how that changes over time. So, for Piaget, we have the sensory motor stage, birth through to 2 years old. And here, we can think of this as the sensory motor stage where infants explore the world through their senses and their motor actions. They're constructing an internal reality based upon their external interaction with the world. And so the key achievements include here the development of object permanence, so understanding that objects continue to exist even when they are out of sight, and the coordination of sensory experiences and with motor actions. So, for example, a child in the sensory motor stage may engage in activities like shaking a rattle or mouthing objects and exploring their surroundings through touch and movement. A very important part of the process of laying a foundation for cognitive development. Then we have the pre-operational stage, so stages 2 through to 7 years of age. And in this pre-operational stage, children become kind of more symbolic thinkers. And here's where language skills begin to develop. But they're still struggling with logical reasoning. So children begin to use symbols such as words and images to represent objects and events. And they begin to engage in pretend play and imaginative activities. However, they have difficulty understanding concepts like conservation. That is, the idea that quantity remains the same despite a change in appearance. And they also struggle with egocentrism. That is, they have difficulty seeing things from others' perspectives. So you'll have children fighting over toys because they think that their desire for the toy is the only thing that's important. Another example of a child in pre-operational stage may be that they're engaging in play, using objects to represent other things. So using a stick as a sword, or saying the floor is lava, you need to stay on the couch. That sort of thing. That would be a typical pre-operational stage activity. Then we have the concrete operational stage. So ages 7 through to 11. And the concrete operational stage is marked by the development of logical thinking and the ability to perform mental operations on concrete objects and events. So here children can understand concepts like conservation, reversibility, and serialization. So, which is basically that objects can be arranged in logical order. However, thinking is still very concrete, and it's tied to tangible experiences. There isn't the abstract reasoning challenging that is going on. And so an example of this would be a child in concrete operational stage can understand that a ball of clay remains the same amount even if it's flattened or rolled into a different shape. That would be an example of one of the key things that can happen in concrete operational stage, which is different from the previous pre-operational stage. But then we get into formal operation, so after around 11 years of age and older. In the formal operational stage, adolescents and adults develop abstract thinking and hypothetical reasoning abilities. And they can engage in deductive reasoning, formulate hypotheses, and consider multiple perspectives on complex issues. And an example of this, a teenager in formal operational thinking can think about hypothetical situations, solve problems systematically, and consider long-term consequences of their actions. Another key feature is that all of a sudden, this formal operational stage person, this adolescent, will begin to think that, well, my parents are dumb. And it's basically what they're doing is they're realizing that they think in a new way, and they don't realize that that's how normal adults think. And so they think that they have come up with these new insights that nobody else in the history of the world has come up with. So they are smart, and their parents are not. And it's just simply not true. It's just the reality that they have finally developed abstract thinking. And so that becomes a key feature in adolescence. Now let's take a look at Albert Bandura. Albert Bandura was born in 1925 in Mundare, Alberta, Canada. And as a psychologist, he really contributed to social learning theory and the development of concepts of self-efficacy. He earned his degree from the University of Iowa, and in 1961 he wrote a book called Social Learning Theory, which introduced the concept of observational learning or modeling. And so this theory posits that individuals learn by observing others and imitating their behavior, and it emphasizes the role of cognitive processes in learning. So a key component of Bandura's social learning theory is the concept of reciprocal determinism, which basically highlights the dynamic interplay between personal factors and behavior and the environment. So according to Bandura, individuals not only learn from their environment, but also actively influence and shape it through their actions. So in the 1970s, Bandura introduced the concept of self-efficacy, which refers to an individual's belief that basically they have the ability to succeed in specific situations or accomplish tasks. And so self-efficacy plays a crucial role in motivation and goal setting and resilience. And so this really is influencing how individuals approach challenges and persist in the face of adversity. Now, throughout his career, Bandura conducted extensive research on topics that really range from aggression and pro-social behavior to the application of social learning theory in diverse fields, and eventually was awarded the APA, the American Psychological Association, Award for Distinguished Scientific Contributions to Psychology, as well as the National Medal of Science. And Albert Bandura's work has not only shaped the field of psychology, but it has influenced education and healthcare. And anytime you've heard someone say you need to be a good role model, they're really hearkening back to Albert Bandura's ideas of social learning theory and how what we do has a huge impact on what other people do as well. And so let's dive in a little bit to Albert Bandura's theory. We also call this the social cognitive theory, and it really emphasizes the role of observational learning, imitation, and cognitive processes in shaping human behavior. One of the key points is observational learning. And so observational learning really occurs when individuals acquire new behaviors or skills, and they do this by watching others and observing the consequences of their actions. And so Bandura's research demonstrated that people are more likely to imitate behaviors that result in desirable outcomes or rewards. And so this is a process known as vicarious reinforcement. For example, a child may learn to tie their shoes by watching an older sibling or a parent demonstrate the skill. And because that's a desirable skill for their siblings and parents, they become to pick it up as well. Modeling is another part of this concept, and the modeling here really involves observing and imitating the behavior of others, and these are known as models. And so they serve as the source or influence or inspiration for the activity. And so models can be individuals in the immediate environment, such as parents and peers or teachers, or they can be symbolic figures portrayed in media and popular culture. And Bandura emphasized that the characteristics of the model, such as their status, their competence, and Similarity to the observer influence the likelihood of imitation, and that's where we get the whole term role modeling from Bandura's modeling from social learning theory. Then we have the cognitive processes, and here Bandura highlighted the importance of cognitive processes such as attention and retention and reproduction and motivation in that whole learning process. So attention is really important because it refers to the extent to which individuals will focus on and pay attention to the model's behavior. Then we have retention, and retention involves encoding and storing information about the observed behavior in memory for future reference. Then we have reproduction, which entails the ability to replicate or imitate the observed behavior, drawing upon one's motor skills and cognitive abilities. And finally, motivation influences the decision to engage in or refrain from imitating the behavior based on anticipated rewards, punishments, or perceived outcomes. Finally, we have self-efficacy. And central to Bandura's theory is the concept of self-efficacy, which really refers to the individual's belief in their capacity to perform specific tasks and achieve desired outcomes. Now, the self-efficacy beliefs will then influence their motivation, their effort, and their persistence in the face of challenges or setbacks. And so Bandura argued that self-efficacy is really essential for shaping the mastery of experience, as well as for social modeling, for social persuasion, and even for physiological arousal. And so Bandura's social learning theory can be applied to a lot of different areas. It can be applied in your everyday life, in education, in psychology, in healthcare, in organizational behavior, in leadership, in so many different areas within life, and becomes profoundly important for us understanding how people grow and change over time. Then finally we have Yuri Bronfenbrenner, and he was someone who was born in 1978 in Moscow, Russia. And he's someone that is well known as a developmental psychologist for his ecological systems theory. Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory really posits that human development is influenced by a dynamic interaction between the individuals and the multiple environments in which they live. There isn't one environment, there are multiple environments. Our environments are nested systems, one within the other, each exerting various degrees of influence upon the individual. So in general, we can think of Bronfenbrenner's model as having four nested systems. The first one is our microsystem, and the microsystem refers to the immediate environments in which the individual interacts. Their friends, their family, their school, their peer group, their community. These are the people that you interact with on a daily, hourly, on a minute-by-minute basis. And these settings play a crucial role in shaping the individual's everyday experiences, as well as their relationships and their socialization processes. Then we have the mesosystem, and the mesosystem encompasses the connections and interactions between different microsystems in the individual's life. For example, the relationship between a child's school and family can impact the child's development, as experiences and expectations in one setting may influence behavior and experiences in another. Then we have the exosystem. And the exosystem consists of environments in which the individual doesn't directly participate, but that nonetheless influences their development. So, for example, this includes the parent's workplace, the local government policies, the community organizations. A child may never go to their parents' work or engage with local government policies, or go to the community organizations, but these still create some part of the environment within which the child lives. And the events and decisions in these settings can indirectly affect the individual through their impact on the microsystems and the mesosystems. Then we have the macro system, which refers to the broader cultural, societal, and ideological contexts that shape the individual's experiences and values. And so this encompasses broad cultural norms, socioeconomic status, historical events, where a person fits within history, the political systems. It also influences what a person values, their beliefs, and their opportunities that are available to a person within a particular society. And Bronfenbrenner really introduced the concept of the chronosystem as well, which recognizes the role of time and historical context in shaping human development. And so the chronosystem highlights how changes over time, such as historical events, family transitions, sociocultural shifts, all impacts life development across the lifespan. So those are some of the key theories that we'll be kind of keeping in mind as we go through this course. I want to close off with just some key terms for you to be mindful of here. First one is the psychoanalytic perspective. And here we have that theoretical perspective pioneered by Sigmund Freud and then expanded upon by Erik Erikson. And that emphasizes the role of unconscious drives, early childhood experiences, and developmental stages in shaping personality and behavior. Then we have the cognitive development. And so this refers to the process by which individuals acquire knowledge, understand concepts, and solve problems. And here, Jean Piaget's model of cognitive development really highlights the stages through which children develop cognitive abilities and understand the world. Then we have social learning theory developed by Albert Bandura. And social learning theory emphasizes the importance of observational learning, imitation, and cognitive processes in shaping behavior. It highlights the role of models of reinforcement and self-efficacy in learning and behavior change. And finally, we have the ecological systems theory, and that's proposed by Yuri Bronfenbrenner. And within this ecological systems theory, it emphasizes the dynamic interaction between individuals and their environments. It identifies multiple levels of influence. We have the microsystem, we have the mesosystem, we have the exosystem, we have the macrosystem, and then finally we have the chronosystem. And all of these play a role in shaping an individual's development across lifespan. Now, with every lecture, I'm going to have a question. I don't have this one posted on the slide, but I do want to highlight a question, and I give a question and an answer, and just a little bit of a hint. These are very useful for the quizzes that we have throughout the course. So be mindful of these questions. So the question for today is, which theoretical perspective emphasizes the importance of unconscious drives and early childhood experiences in shaping personality development? Is it cognitive development theory? Is it social learning theory? Is it psychoanalytic perspective? Or is it the ecological systems theory? Well, the key to that question was the importance of unconscious drives. And that points to the correct answer here, which would be the psychoanalytic perspective. And so this perspective, founded by Sigmund Freud and then expanded upon by Erik Erikson, emphasizes the role of unconscious processes, early childhood experiences, and developmental stages in shaping personality behavior. So, what have we taken a look at in this lecture? Well, we have looked at how our understanding of human growth and development has changed over time, how our perspective of childhood has changed over time, and then specifically we've focused in on some key theories, from Freud's psychosexual theory to Bandura's social learning theory to Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory. And we've encountered different perspectives and how these can provide insight into different stages within life. Of primary importance within this course, I've highlighted that the framework proposed by Erik Erikson and his developmental theories play a huge role within our understanding of lifespan development in this course. And so I do encourage you to be very mindful of any time you see something from Erikson to mark it down, be mindful of it. And as we engage through the different discussions and lectures and activities within this course, I hope that you gain a deeper insight into your own life and to the lives of those around you. You take care, and I'll see you in our next lecture. Goodbye.